We're talking today with Doug Voss of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Doug, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Buffalo, New York, March 1st, 1950.
Okay, now did you grow up there or did you move around?
We moved from New York to here. In Grand Rapids in '63, I was 13 when I moved here.
Okay, now what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My dad was he worked at a lumber mill, and my mom was a homemaker, and then eventually she went out and got a job too.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then what prompted the move from Buffalo to Michigan?
Well, my folks had split,
Okay.
so my mother came here to Grand Rapids, and me and my two sisters moved here, and we've been here ever since.
All right, and then where did you go to school in Grand Rapids?
I went to two schools. One was Union High School, and then we moved to the south side of town. I went to South High School, and I was in the last graduating class of 1968 from that high school.
All right, and that's no longer there. Where was it in terms of street address or?
On the corner of Jefferson and Hall.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because the baseball field, or the athletic field was where actually the Grand Rapids Chicks played baseball at one point. So
Oh, yeah,
we'll
okay.
go back a little bit farther before you got to town. They were there.
Okay.
Okay. Now, as you're growing up, you're going to high school, mid-1960s now. You got Vietnam War going on, and anti-war protests, and counterculture, all that kind of stuff. How much were you paying attention to or aware of at that time?
Quite a bit. Actually, since the mid-60s, 65, I think, is when they had the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Late 64, yeah.
64, and neighbors in the whole neighborhood, that's all they talked about. We're going to war. And from that point on, I liked history anyway, so I paid attention to the news every night. And then started to see the numbers go up of casualties and all that, and it was a real deal.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And as far as you were concerned, was the war sort of a good cause, or were not sure about that, or?
Well, at my age, I thought it was a good cause. I think back then in the early or mid '60s, excuse me, a lot of people were for the war, the effort, anyways. So I was right along with them too.
Okay. Now, when did you graduate from high school?
1968.
Okay. Kind of a tumultuous year.
Very tumultuous, very historical year. Yeah, I think it's almost like where the dividing line is from youth and innocence to the harshness of reality is what it reminded me of. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, you had the King assassination, and then
Right.
Kennedy after you had
Kennedy.
gotten out. Now, was South High integrated? Did you have white and black students together?
Yes, we did, and I had black friends. Everything was peaceful. It was a great school to go to. I actually enjoyed going to South High School a lot. And the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated, though, you could see there was a division between the races, and I got my first lesson, and there is, even though we can get along, but there is something that some of the white folks don't quite understand, and so I learned there too.
All right.
But yeah.
Now, at what point did you decide to go into the military?
Actually, I was in high school ROTC in my sophomore year, junior year, and senior year, and I decided I wanted to be in the Army in my junior year. I made up my mind. I thought it was a very noble cause in Vietnam. I believed in the domino theory at that time, and I thought that with two countries warring against each other, there's got to be a way to render, get some peace over there. And I did have high hopes for Special Forces, but I just couldn't make it.
All right. Talk a little bit about the high school ROTC. What did that actually consist of?
That was actually based on the Army. It was Army High School ROTC, and they had units just like in the Army, squads, platoons, and companies. And I rose up through the ranks. I was a private when I first started over at Union, and by the time I graduated, I was captain and had my own company. And it really surprised me because in my senior year, all of a sudden I was given this, so to speak, it's ROTC commission, and I thought, wow, here I am. I went from a staff sergeant all the way up to captain. But that's how I really hit the books hard in ROTC. I studied very hard, and I enjoyed the class, the rifle team, the drill team, and the whole thing, the whole aspect of introduction to military code of conduct and drill and ceremony and all of those kinds of things. Basic tactics, I really enjoyed it. So that fired me right up, yeah.
Okay. All right, so at what point did you actually go sign up?
I signed up right after graduation. I graduated, let's see, it was in June, beginning of June. Signed up right after graduation, and I know my mother did not like the idea because she was afraid I was going to go to Vietnam, and I was adamant. I was 18, still naive, I gotta admit, but I signed up beginning of June, and I started basic July 1st.
All right. Now, where did you go? Did you have a physical before you went off to basic, or?
Yes, over to Detroit. There's the. I remember we stayed at the Fort Pick Hotel, but I can't remember the name of the fort where we actually got our physical.
Fort Wayne, maybe? Was that, there's Wayne, and there's some point there was
Wayne over there, yeah. But I can't remember. Okay. But anyways, yeah. I did get my physical, passed physical, took a battery of tests, written tests, and did fine on those. And
okay. Now, when you went there for the physical, were there a mix of guys who were drafted, enlisted, or just a bunch of other people, or?
There was a mix, drafted and enlisted. Yeah, I mean, everybody got on the bus and everybody headed to the same place, wherever they came from in Michigan.
Okay. Yeah. Now, sometimes you hear stories about people going in for the physical and trying to scam the system in one way or another. Did you observe any of that?
Yes, I did. Back then, as we know, the homosexual movement was underground. I mean, it was closeted. But it was also an easy way to get out of the Army back then. I mean, there was no homosexual activity allowed whatsoever under any circumstances. And I know a couple guys, they tried the trick, and it worked. They talked in a high voice to the doctor, and they acted effeminate, and they ushered them out quicker than you can blink an eye. And I saw it in basic training one time too there, yeah.
All right. Do they try to do, I mean, sometimes they talk about trying to do things like mess with their blood pressure or sugar levels or things like that.
That I haven't, I've heard of stories but didn't witness any.
Okay, but you saw those couple. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, after the physical, you got to go back home, or did you go right off to training?
I got to go back home. It was for about 2 weeks or so, and then I had my orders to report it to Fort Bragg.
Okay, so you go to Fort Bragg, and how do they get you out there?
I flew down there,
okay,
and then they bussed us in from there.
Okay. And what sort of reception do you get when you arrive at Fort Bragg?
Well, that was a fun one. As soon as those doors open up, here's these big drill sergeants with a Smokey the Bear hat on, yelling at the top of their lungs. They must pick these guys that can do 100 decibels on purpose, you know. And I know it's intended to confuse us, which it did. We had to file off the bus, double time, quickly line up, and so here we are in the Army now. That's yeah.
Do you remember what time of day it was when you got there?
It was at night.
Okay.
Yep, it was dark.
And do they start processing you right away, or do they take you to a barracks first, or?
No, they kept us up all night processing us in. Yeah, yeah. Sleep deprivation right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what kinds of things do they do in the processing?
Well, there's more tests to take. There's a lot of lectures on military code and all that sort of stuff. And I remember filling out all kinds of paperwork. You know, there's life insurance. I remember that we had to fill out. Geez, I can't remember all that paperwork, but we filled out a bunch of paperwork, though. That's in our files.
And was that all before you got to go to sleep?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what about, did they cut your hair, give you uniforms, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that was actually the next day.
Okay.
That was where we all stood in line and got the buzz cut, and then we went over and got our uniforms. It was all done fairly quickly. I think it took about 2 or 3 days to get everything, and then we were bussed off to our training brigade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what kind of facilities did you have there? Do you have an old World War II barracks or newer stuff? Or
We had the old World War II barracks, and we had to do fire watch every night because they were old and they were like tinder boxes. So there was always somebody just watching, just in case a fire might start in a building. Every building had somebody doing fire watch. We all had to do it.
that was summer though, so you didn't have to have heat in the building.
Right. But it was still all part of the protocol. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did the actual training program consist of once you got into that?
PT was the first thing, physical fitness, and then we actually got more shots when we arrived at Fort Bragg. I know we got some. We were assigned our weapons, if I remember right, during the first or second week. But we had to learn a lot of how to make our bunks, how to set everything up in your lockers. Everything had to be the same, uniform, regimented. You know, no deviation. Everything had to be just perfect, as it could be, anyways. So, and the drill sergeant drilled us, and that's where we learned how to march and do left flank, right flank, and column right, column left, etc. All those moves. Mm-hmm. And we got yelled at a lot because he would always say, "Not your right. That's your civilian right. I'm talking about your military right." When he'd yell at you. Yeah.
All right. How easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that?
It was easy for me. Thankfully, because of the ROTC, my ROTC instructor told me kind of what to expect, but I didn't really know until I got there. And it didn't bother me. The hardships. I grew up in the country, so like that, sleep deprived and eating C rations or any of that kind of training and yelling, it didn't bother me. I just went with the flow.
Okay. And you're maybe familiar with some of the orders and the drill process and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. There were other ROTC graduates also, and when it came to time to pick squad leaders, I didn't get picked, which I didn't mind anyways. But they picked the other guys, mainly because they tried to pick the big guys who had a little bit of heft to them. So if they made an order, it'd be a little more understood. So, yeah.
All right. Now, on the whole, how did the drill instructors treat you? I mean, were they fair or just confusing, or?
At first, it was very confusing. Yeah, but that got over with within a week or two. And my drill instructor, Sergeant Worth, I still remember him. Very fair instructor. He didn't seem to have favorites, at least from my perspective. Everyone, regardless, if you made a mistake, you're going to hear about it, you know. And if you keep making a mistake, then the whole platoon does push-ups, and it's to try to get the guys to conform. I mean, it sounds sometimes to some people, I am not going to conform, but the Army, you have to follow orders, and that's what they teach, and you have to conform. And it didn't bother me to do that. Yeah.
Now, did the guys in the platoon kind of police each other? And if somebody screws up, then?
Yes. There were such things as that too. I mean, the most I saw, I've heard of blanket parties, but I didn't see any. Where somebody who just keeps messing up all the time and he's drawing the squad down that you're in, or the platoon. Well, they had a blanket party, is what they called it when I was in the Army. At night, put the blanket over the guy and just pound on him, and then everybody would just scatter. But it was all done in the dark. But I didn't witness any of that. I've heard about them, and that word spread around. I mean, that was enough, I think, to keep people straight, at least in my platoon.
Okay. Now, were there guys in your platoon that just were really having trouble, that couldn't handle it well, or?
Yeah, there were a couple guys. One guy was actually, he was in the National Guard, but he stopped going to his meetings. And with that contract, if you miss so many meetings in a row, you're going to go active. And he came in, and he was fit to be tied. He was out of shape, terribly out of shape. He was I think he was the oldest. He was like 30 or something like that. I mean, they don't care. You miss your meeting, you're going to go. He did have a hard time. And there was another guy, he did have a hard time with left and right. He was just a nervous wreck. But he got over it in time. That's about all I remember.
Okay. Do you have a sense of whether this was a mix of enlistees and draftees, or mostly men who enlisted voluntarily, or could you not tell?
In basic, we couldn't tell. We couldn't tell. We were all green. It didn't matter where you came from or whatever. Everybody's green. So in basic, they really do a good job, I think, to try to get everybody to be Army, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Now, did you kind of figure that out after a while you were there, understood what they were doing and why they were doing it that way?
Yeah, I did. Actually, after basic training, you know, and when I was finally stationed in over in Korea, that's where. But when I look back, I think, you know what? I think I know now why they did all what they did. Everybody was together all the time, and it builds an esprit de corps. And the camaraderie comes from that. You still never forget those guys, even in basic, you know, and it's a lifetime experience. Yeah.
All right. And what kind of weapons did you train on there?
My brigade, interesting, because I was qualified on the M14, but we were the first brigade to also train on the M16. They were converting over to the M16, all training after our brigade was finished. So we qualified on both, or one of the few units. It was what is it, June, July, and August of '68 that qualified on both weapons. Yeah.
Okay, because they had introduced the M16 in Vietnam prior to that, but for a long time people trained still on the M14. So
yes, they did. Yeah.
Now, in high school with ROTC, did you have M1s or M14s?
Well, we had M1s for our drill rifles, and I was on the rifle team. We had it was a Remington bolt action 22, 50-foot range there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How long did basic training last?
Mine was 8 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you completed that, what's the next step?
Then you go to advanced individual training, and I was shipped off to Fort Jackson for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's South Carolina?
South Carolina, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so were you doing infantry training there or something else?
I did something else. I wanted to be a mechanic, so I took mechanic training, and I did pretty good there. That was also an 8-week course. Yeah.
Yeah. And what did that actually consist of?
It started with just the basics of how an engine runs, and then we went through the different components of a vehicle, basic vehicle. All vehicles have a suspension of some sort. All of them have a drivetrain of some sort. Some are diesel powered, some are gasoline powered, so we worked on both. Electrical, we had to learn electrical. And once we had all our coursework, it took, I don't know, 6-7 weeks for all that. We had to learn to drive these vehicles, learn to understand them. How to change tires. I mean, a lot of it was basic, but then we had a test at the end, and it was actual physical test out in the field. And they would take 2.5-ton trucks, and they would disable them. We weren't there to see them do it. Then we'd have to go in there and figure out why it wouldn't start, and if it did start, why it ran poorly, or why it wouldn't go. And each individual had to do that to pass pass the course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you have any trouble with that, or did you?
I didn't. No, I ate that stuff up too. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, were you working just with wheeled vehicles at this point, trucks?
At
Jeeps?
that point, it was wheeled vehicles. That's what I signed up for, and I thought that's what I would be doing.
Okay. Now, had you chosen that specialization when you enlisted back home, or how did you wind up with that assignment?
Well, when I took my test in Detroit, let's see, I talked to a recruiter, went to take the test, and then came back, and he says, you know, you're best qualified for mechanical aptitude. He says, you know, there are MOSs for that, mechanic, engineer, I think they're, you know, repair things, skills.
Yeah, communications and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. So I picked mechanic. I like cars anyway, so I said, yeah, I think I'll do that. It'll give me a kickstart when I get out of the Army.
Now, did it matter? I mean, how long did you enlist for? How many years?
3 years I signed up for, yeah.
And draftees normally got 2.
Correct.
And
correct.
so did this give you an advantage in terms of getting this kind of specialization as far as you know?
It did back then. It's not 100% guaranteed that's what you'll get, but it was definitely a better advantage than being drafted.
Right.
And almost certain infantry, you know, but not everybody, of course, went into infantry.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got your 8 weeks in South Carolina. Now, I'm assuming that the barracks in these places are not air conditioned.
Mine was, believe it or not.
Okay. At Fort Jackson or both of them?
Fort Jackson. Fort Bragg, no. Fort Jackson, yeah. They were actually newer barracks back in the late 60s there.
Now, did they treat you differently in AIT than they had in basic?
Almost the same, but not quite as how shall I say, on your back all the time. When I was in my AIT, we had an IG inspection coming. So the platoon sergeant, he was hard on us. We had to scrub the floors every day, and I never understood why we had to do that. We had to polish them, and you heard the toothbrush getting down in the cracks and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, everything had to be just as best as it could be. And he would pull an inspection every day, and if he saw a flaw, he'd tear the bed apart, for instance. And that was a little bit annoying. When it was all done, he says, you know, you guys did good work. I leaned on you hard. Said, but we passed the IG inspection. It's not normal for AIT, but it was just that time for this barracks to get inspected. So that's how that worked.
And IG would be Inspector General?
Yes, yes, yeah.
All right. So you've now gotten through that. Now what happens to you?
Then you get your orders. That's where you really get to an Army base, Army post, or whatever. And that was in, let's see, October. Actually, it was in November. That's right. I was all done with my training then.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I went home on leave, but it took a couple weeks before I got orders, and believe it or not, my orders were to go to Vietnam first. And just a few days later, they picked about 8 of us out of that group and said, well, you guys are going to Korea on the DMZ because there's a lot of things going on over there. They need manpower. Good luck to you, because there's things going on over there too, but we had a relief too, you know, no Vietnam.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you find all that out before you left home, or was that when you were en route someplace that you got?
Oh, I found that out before I left for leave for home.
Okay.
Yeah, I was at Fort Jackson. I think I had to wait about a week or so before I got my orders.
Okay.
And then, like I said, they changed them real quick.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
How did your mother respond to the different orders? I mean, did you see her reaction about Vietnam?
Yeah. She was relieved I wasn't going to Vietnam when I told her that. And then when I told her I was going to Korea, she read the newspaper all the time and saw the news. She knew about the Pueblo being captured. She knew about the Blue House raid in Korea. She had heard, it's back page news back then, of patrols being ambushed. So she says, you know, it's dangerous there, Doug. Be careful. Yep.
All right. Now, how do they actually get you out to Korea?
I flew on Northwest. I guess the Army contracted Northwest Airlines, and I forgot how long the flight was. I want to say 12 hours. It was a long, long flight over there.
Do you remember if you stopped any place along the way, or was it just straight through?
We did stop. I think it was like, if my pronunciation is right, Askoda, Japan. There is a military base there, anyways.
Okay, so you stopped in Japan on the way.
Yeah,
over.
we had to refuel, and we got out to stretch our legs, which was good. Yeah, yeah.
All right. And then where do you land in Korea?
That was at Kimpo Airfield. I believe that just north of Seoul.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And it was a warm day in November when that door come open, and because we heard how cold Korea gets, and you know, breath of warm air coming at you. Plus, they had that indigenous smell over there too, that from rice paddies. If anybody's ever smelled the fertilizer in the rice paddies and all that, it was a
For people
whole new world.
who don't know, what kind of fertilizer do they use?
They use any kind of excrement, any kind of waste from any kind of creature on Earth that they can use. And people too. But they store it in a honey wagon, and they'll take it out there and fertilize the rice paddies. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's warm and fragrant when you arrive. What unit were you assigned to?
2nd Infantry Division first. I had to go to 2nd Infantry Division. Their head camp I cannot remember the name of it, but I think it's Camp White Cloud. But that's where 2nd Infantry Division has their replacement barracks, and we get a little bit of an orientation there. That was about 3 or 4 days or so of orientation.
Now, is the orientation toward conditions along the front, or about Korea itself, or?
The basic part of it, though, because not everybody everybody went to different parts of Korea, so it was about Korea basically, and a little bit about the DMZ. We didn't get that until we went to the actual incoming. That was another camp we had to go to. We stayed there overnight, and then had our orders to our individual camp within a couple days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what unit within the 2nd Division did you go to?
Well, they assigned me to Headquarters Company, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Infantry Division.
Or regiment?
Regiment,
Yeah.
regiment, yes.
Okay. And now where were they located?
They were located right north of Freedom Bridge, across the Imjin River, and they were located right along the DMZ, between the Imjin River and the DMZ.
And this is the area right around Panmunjom?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We were only about 3 clicks from Panmunjom, yeah. Yeah.
All right. And what was your unit doing at the time you joined it? I mean, what kind of duties did they have up there?
Well, the main job of this 2nd of the 23rd was to conduct patrols in the DMZ and also do maintenance along the barrier fence, and also conduct patrols along the area between the barrier fence and the Imjin River. That was the main function, and it was 24/7 to constantly look for any North Korean infiltrators, and in the DMZ, orders there were shoot to kill. Nobody belongs there. Nobody.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if no one was supposed to be there, what were you doing there?
They call it no man's zone, but the patrols were there. Yeah, yeah. And the ironic thing is, though, I was trained as a mechanic, but they were so short of people or soldiers. That we were also given duties, not to the point of everyday duties, but we did night patrols and stakeout. We were sort of like the eyes and ears before starlight scopes came out, and we listened and tried to do our best to watch for any kind of movement. And if there was some movement, we had to call back in for permission to fire, where in the DMZ, they didn't need permission. It was just automatically, you see gunfire coming at you, you're going to shoot. But also in my situation, it was the same way too. But if you heard something or saw something, then we had to get permission. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you first came and you joined Headquarters Company, were you there as a mechanic, or were you just learning how stuff worked?
Well, they had enough wheel mechanics, and they put me in as a track mechanic.
Okay.
And they said, we're going to, your OJT, on-the-job training. We'll show you how the armored personnel carriers work, and that's what you're going to be working on. So I caught on quick. You know, the basics of engines and all that is pretty much straightforward. Drivetrain, pretty much straightforward. Transmissions in both.
Did they use those carriers much, or was most of the patrolling just on foot?
The patrols were actually used on foot. Now the vehicles, they used them to bring the soldiers out to the barrier fence and then drop them off. But once at the DMZ, then it was all foot patrols. That was part of the truce agreement. Foot patrols only. You had to have an MP, shoulder identification on. Your vehicle had to have white flags. And I don't think track vehicles were allowed in the DMZ. They could go up to the barrier fence. Right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, how soon after you got there did you start going on these patrols?
It was only a few weeks. It was only a few weeks, yeah. Yeah, it was, let's see, November when I got there or so? Or was it? Yeah, yeah. And I was orientated and I didn't know a thing to do. I went through a quick orientation, and they did a good job on really telling us the seriousness of the business. It can be a real lull for a while, but you never know when action's going to happen. And my first night out there, I just did not know. I didn't have a chance to get a wink of sleep or anything, you know. And stayed awake all night.
Now, would
Yeah.
they have you move out to a position and just stay there, or were you moving all the time?
My particular patrol at the head from headquarters company was there to hunker down. It was like an ambush, for instance.
Okay.
And it's usually 8 men.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a radio man. I think they were all riflemen and one M79 Grenadier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a machine gun with you?
We didn't have the machine gun, no. No. M14s could go on automatic, but we
Right.
didn't have, and I'm not quite sure why, but I know machine guns were not allowed in the DMZ.
Okay. Now, but you had M14s rather than M16s?
We had M14s, yes, and M16s were starting to come into the country when I was there. This is in '68,
Yeah.
and some units had M16s. It was a mix, and it took until late summer, I think, before we got M16s. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how long did it take before something happened on one of these patrols that you were on?
How long did it take before something
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. How long were you? I mean, were there ever any incidents that happened, or shooting, or anything else going on when you were out on patrol?
Oh, okay. I did witness a couple incidents. Now, it wasn't my particular stakeout ambush situation that didn't engage the enemy, but it was the troops along the barrier fence and in the foxholes, as well as the guard post. And there was a couple of times I did see some tracers going off, and they used food gas there. It's like napalm, but they put it in a barrel, and they'll light it off either with C4 or I've heard of them. I don't know if they did it, but also with a claymore mine, and it would light up the area. I mean, that food gas, you could see that up in the air. I don't know, I want to say 30, 40 feet, you know, and it sprayed it all over the place, and that was. If the guys on the line happened to see an infiltrator or something, rather, they served a dual purpose. You know, light up the area, but also it would take care of that threat too. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's probably fairly spectacular when it goes off.
It is. It is. It'll light the sky up. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, during the time that you were there, I mean, did your unit take casualties, or was it?
When I was there, the 23rd, our sister unit, the 1st of the 23rd took casualties, as well as the 2nd 23rd took casualties. The 2nd 23rd, I can't recall, to be honest with you, if they did take casualties then in '69, but they did prior to when I got there. So we were told of it and made sure that we understood, you know, the seriousness of the situation. I know there were firefights and there were no casualties. There were a lot of those. I mean, brush fires, we called them. And it would only last just a few minutes. And occasionally you might hear of a firefight that lasted 12 hours. I mean, that was kind of rare. And I know there was one that 2nd 23rd was in, but there were no casualties on our side. I guess I think a couple North Koreans were KIA. Yeah.
Now, did the North Koreans try to infiltrate your lines and get past them?
They did, and occasionally they would succeed, and it was usually during fog or inclement weather. But sometimes they would just be as brazen as they could be, and they would go across the sand patch, which is raked all the time. And you could see their movement across there, and they would cut the fence, and they would crawl through. And sometimes they would actually make it through and get into the general population. But the South Koreans were very loyal. I mean, they would turn in a North Korean infiltrator in a heartbeat. So if we didn't catch them, the South Koreans would. Yeah, yeah. But we held the line, basically.
Okay. And do you have any idea what the infiltrators were trying to accomplish?
Yes, I have a fair idea anyways. There was, from what I understand, is a pact between Ho Chi Minh and Kim Il-sung, the dictator in North Korea, to try to keep troops busy along a DMZ. because they felt that America was weak during the late 60s, you know, with all the protests and all that. Say, you know, we can just push them a little bit and maybe they'll all topple over and they'll all leave. So they kept pushing the envelope. North Korea did, you know. I mean, they shot helicopters down, airplanes, and the SS Pueblo, and there's a number of incidents that North Korea did to try to push the envelope. And the other reason, also ROK soldiers, Republic of Korean soldiers and Marines were sent to Vietnam too, and they were good fighters, very good fighters. And so the idea was to keep those troops busy as well. The American sector, which was the Western Corridor, and then the eastern part was up to Korea to take care of along the DMZ.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just create diversion and divert resources.
Just diversions, yeah. I mean, just to keep them busy, to keep them off their, off balance, just enough. Yeah.
Now, did you have Korean soldiers working with you?
Yes, we had Koreans augmented to the United States Army, which we called Katusas, and they were good soldiers. They were proud to serve their country. They could all speak English. And every unit had at least one or two of them in their platoon, at least, but some had more. Yeah.
Could you observe much about how the Korean military functioned, or how they treated their soldiers, or anything like that, or were these guys just with you individually? So,
yeah, the Katusas were different than the regular Army. The Katusas still served their military time, but with the U.S. Army. But they were good at interpreting in case we ever got in a situation like that. No, they were good at teaching us the culture, things like that. But when it comes to the ROK Army, I never saw any of their maneuvers or anything like that, but I've heard some stories about how hardcore they are. They're tough. Those guys are tough. Yeah.
Also stories about sort of the way the officers treat the enlisted men, or that kind of thing.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, they didn't get just treated harshly like in basic training. They were hit. Yeah, yeah. They weren't afraid to knock them out if they had to. I mean, those are stories that I heard, and yeah.
All right. Now, over the course of how long did you spend in Korea?
13 months.
Okay. And then over the course of that time, did you have different assignments? I mean, you got assigned to the track units, and then what else were you doing?
Well, also, the barrier fence, the whole fence was finished by the time I got there. But there were some finishing touches. They had foxholes along the barrier fence as well. And they wanted to line those foxholes with cement culvert pipe, which was a pretty good idea because during monsoons, it would just wash the foxholes right in, you know. So they also had to have a sump in case a grenade by a North Korean was thrown in there. They could kick it down into this sump. They had to dig down. But my job, anyways, was to unload those culvert pipes along the DMZ, where they were going to install them. The engineers and contractors then came in after that. So I used my VTR, which is Vehicle Track Recovery, and me and the crew went out and we unloaded those pipes, and we still had to be cautious. We had to be loaded for bear in case anything happened then. But that was one of my jobs, doing that. And go out to the line also to inspect vehicles that were there, because some of them were just sitting there all the time, but they weren't driven around very much, so we would go out and inspect those. Another thing that some of the guys in headquarters company was used for too was we'd put on mock patrols for visiting dignitaries.
Okay.
So that was kind of interesting. I don't know, you know, congressmen, senators, or whoever, even other foreign dignitaries. O.P. Mazie was used for that observation post. It was a great place to see into North Korea. They had the BC scope. You could really look right into North Korea. But we did actually go on the other side of the barrier fence, and they showed us how to walk a patrol, and we did that for the dignitaries and all that. So the infantry guys, needless to say, those guys were the ones that walked the patrols. They did the real deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had sort of an assortment of duties, but these were all while with the headquarters company.
Yes.
And did you stay officially with the headquarters company the whole time, or did you get reassigned?
I was temporarily assigned sometimes to C Company. Yeah, yeah. They were short of mechanics, so I would go over there and help out whatever the pressing issue was, you know, because that's the whole idea, I think, as headquarters company is to back up the line companies. So we did that, and then when we were south of the IMGN, I drove an APC from C Company. Did that for a while. That's a M113. Yeah, yeah. I did a lot of different things. They had me on temporary assignments over there for. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, did the units rotate off the line, or did men go back to the rear periodically, or?
We did. They started that rotation, I think it was in 1968, but 4 months on the line, then 4 months to retrain, resupply, get your breath, and then go back up for 4 more months on the DMZ. It seemed to be better because even though it wasn't Vietnam along the DMZ, the tension and the hypervigilance that you had to have constantly when you're along a barrier fence, or actually anywhere north of the DMZ, would wear on you. So it was good to just relax, you know, go south and fix and repair. And
Okay. And when you went south, where did you go?
my place was Camp Lawton, and that was the first camp south of the Imjin River.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't go very far.
Didn't go very far. If we were needed, we were there, and we knew we were in that position, but it was more relaxed, anyways. They weren't quite as strict there either. In along the DMZ, we didn't have to have spit shine boots. You know, if you got dirty, you got dirty. It was part of your job. So, and even south, I mean, we kept our uniforms fairly. We had houseboys. They kept the uniforms starched and spit shine boots, but it wasn't strack like it would be back in the States. Yeah.
All right. Now, when you're in the rear area now, do you see any civilian population? Can you leave the base and go places?
Yes, you can. You can leave the base. There is one stipulation. They had a strict, and I mean very strict, curfew in all of South Korea. After midnight, nobody on the road whatsoever. And anybody caught on the road, the Korean police would pick you up, you know, or I think the MPs too were in on that too. But other than that, yeah, there was only a certain percentage that were allowed to go on leave. You could go into town. You could go to the clubs. You could go to the USO. You could go, you know, some guys, we'd just go to the restaurant and meet some of the Koreans. Most of them spoke English, or at least partial English, just to learn the country, you know. That was interesting too. Yeah.
All right. And would you go to Seoul, or was that too far away?
We could go to Seoul if we wanted to. Yeah, yeah. I didn't. I wished I would have. But I went to Moonsani. That was the closest large town that was near us. And there was one other village I can't remember either.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what impression did you have of the Korean people generally?
The longer I was there, the more I got to like the Korean people. I got to respect them. You know, they lived a hard scrabble life, especially up by the DMZ. Back in the 60s, I would have never dreamed that South Korea would be like it is now. I think it's the 8th largest economy. But back then, it was just horse and cart, or not horse and cart. They had it looked like a garden tiller, but a trailer hitch on the back of it, and they putted around in that, and they would sit on their trailer, and that was a wealthy Korean back then. Yeah, yeah. But I liked their tenacity though. I mean, they lived off from hardly nothing. They just keep going. They keep their culture going. I thought it was interesting. You know, some of their songs actually almost reminds me of Native American music here in the United States. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, were there things that men were not supposed to do off base aside from break curfew?
Right. There were restrictions on certain clubs to go to. Every month the clubs had to be inspected. The gals had to be inspected. So that was off limits if they didn't pass the test. Now, the problem was, it was easy to forge. There was a lively black market over there, though. You know, I mean, off base. But if you were a smart GI, you stayed away from all that stuff.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, were there drugs around at that point? This is 68,
You know what?
69?
When I was there in the 69, there was hardly any drugs over there. I only knew of one instance. God, I can't remember what the two guys were. And they talked about having some marijuana. And that's the first time I heard of that, and that was the middle of 69. And I heard that after I left, I think it was, well, maybe in 70, 71, things were really getting bad over there. Yep, they had access, and you could get anything you wanted in Korea.
Yeah. It was a point when heroin became widely available. That's about 1970 or so. It affected Vietnam.
I think you're right, yeah.
May have gotten to Korea too.
Yeah.
But basically, how would you characterize morale in your division that you could see?
Well, from the time that I spent there, the year and 1 month, morale was pretty good. We had a change of battalion commanders about midway through my tour. And ironically, he was from Michigan, and I'm still trying to find out his name. Lieutenant Colonel, I can't remember his name. But he came in really strack, meaning that he was strict, and we used to have little nightstands beside our bunk. It was unauthorized, but the other commander didn't care. And we could store things in there. You could put a picture of your girlfriend on a nightstand, but we called them idiwa stands. It's kind of a Korean slang. And when the new battalion commander came in, he says, "That's not military authorized. You know, every company had to get rid of their idiwa stands or their headboards they fancy made, you know, and make it look like barracks again." And we thought, "Oh no, what am I in for?" He turned out to be a good leader. He wasn't hardcore like we thought, and he held a party at the EMNCO club for Michiganders, because there were so many of us from Michigan that were in the 23rd Infantry Regiment that we almost filled the club. I don't know if it was because our weather here is like Korea, or how the coincidence happened, but yeah, I wished I could find out who he is and see if he's still around. Yeah.
Right. Now, I just had a really good question in mind, and it went away. Okay. Are there particular incidents that happened while you were there that stand out in your mind that you haven't brought into the story yet?
Oh, definitely. Yes. The Pueblo crew was released December 23rd or 24th of 1968. And I was there, and I was on stakeout duty the night before, so I have the next day off. Coincidentally, I got to see the bus with the crew, both buses, going right by Camp Dodge, heading down across Freedom Bridge. And I waved. You know, I was the only one standing out there, you know, but I thought, how historical. I got to see these guys.
Yeah.
I wished I'd had my camera, you know. Now, that's one very important incident. I mean, Pueblo incident seems to be the peak of the hostilities at that time, yeah.
Now, you mentioned you should have had your camera. Were you allowed to have cameras in that area?
Yes and no. In the DMZ, no. You got caught. Harsh discipline, very harsh discipline. Along the barrier fence, that's okay. Yeah, but in the DMZ, that was a no-no, no pictures, yeah.
All right. How much contact did you have with people at home?
Letters, you know, just good old snail mail. Yeah, there's my mother, aunts and uncles. There was a parish priest, you know, he was always interested in how I was doing over there, so I wrote him. And let's see, my mom didn't get letters from me for a while. We were out on field maneuvers, and this is another incident where North Koreans managed to get, there was 30 or 40 North Koreans that infiltrated through the Republic of Korea sector, which was rare. They got through, I think it was during the monsoon. I mean, it's, and they were scattered out all over. So we were on maneuvers, and then it became a real alert. We had to go out and hunt for these North Koreans as well. So I didn't write home for, oh geez, quite a few weeks actually. And, but I did write a letter to the priest. And then he told my ma, Doug's okay, he's busy. So yeah, we were busy then, but they did round up most of them. They got between the American Army and the Rocks, they either KIA or rounded up and sent to Seoul to the prison there. Yeah.
Right. Now, how close was your position to the sector that the Korean Army was defending?
We were almost butted up with them.
Okay.
Let's see. The Western Corridor, actually, they call it Western because the 38th parallel, you know, is straight. But our corridor went from Seoul, it was facing west, and then at that dogleg is where we're heading east, is where the Rock Army was. So they were on the east side of Panmunjom, I want to say 10 clicks or so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah.
close enough to you that if someone infiltrates that sector, then that
Yeah.
does directly affect you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Other incidents that you've got on your list here.
Other incidents, yeah, let's see here. Oh, I know what I wanted to mention though. I remember my first night there. I had just gotten in and just didn't even eat or anything, you know, and it was dark. And I got assigned my bunk and put my duffel bag down and everything else, and I was just laying on the bunk kind of resting. And then I heard the distinctive sound of mortars going off. Thump! You know, and it's, oh my God, what's going on here? And they all laughed, you know. You were called a turtle, a beginner, you know, like a rookie. We were called turtles over there. And they said, Turtle, you got a lot to learn, man. Those are 4 deuce mortars going off. They had sending up some illumination flares that were requested by patrol on the DMZ. And after that, it was no big deal, you know. So we'd hear them every now and then. Yeah.
But you never took any incoming fire or anything like that?
When I was there, we didn't, but there were incidents before I arrived there where there were 2 barracks that were blown up by North Korean saboteurs. Yeah. Yep. Near Panmunjom, actually. Yep. And there were Jeeps and trucks, though, that did run over landmines. And the thing is, the landmines sometimes were brought in by the North Koreans. They would use probes and find a landmine and just carefully dig it out, carefully take it underneath the fence with them, and they'll plant it in the road. Yeah, yeah. So we did respect North Koreans, their military. I mean, they were tenacious, but they took a lot of KIAs though. Let's see. I wanted to mention my, where is it here? Oh, they used smudge pots along the barrier fence at night. And remember the old construction days, they had the round, looks like a round bomb of some sort, and then there would be a flame up there. And at night, we'd go up to the NCO club, and it was on top of a hill, and you could see those smudge pots lined up all along the barrier fence. And it was kind of a surreal thing, but you could at least see the barrier fence. It was kind of one reason they did that, but the other was if an infiltrator came up close and they got through the sand trap, it would reflect off their face. That smudge pot would be just enough light. This is before we got the starlight scopes. And from the top of that hill, I got to witness one of those incidents of the food gas going off. I mean, that's and then the green tracers coming from the north and red from the south. It was a quick firefight, but it's surreal. Here you are, you're inside a club, you know, you're drinking your favorite beverage, and next thing you know, it's time to go back down. We got to get ready for work, you know, or the next day's shift anyway. So, and then you go out there, boom, you know, and yeah.
Okay. Now, did you have officers or NCOs who'd been to Vietnam?
Yes, we did, and they were good. The vast majority of the ones that, as a matter of fact, our stakeout patrols always had to have an experienced squad leader. And thank God, because I wasn't trained infantry, but I got a quick course in some basic infantry tactics and how to hunker down and stay quiet in ambush, and how to walk a patrol into the no man's zone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And did you know much about what was going on in Vietnam or pay any attention to that, or did you have enough to do already?
I'll tell you what, Vietnam kind of took the back burner there. We would hear things. I mean, I went there after the Tet Offensive,
Right.
and that coincided with Pueblo and all that. But after that, yeah, we had enough to be concerned about. Yeah.
Now we talked about a little bit about morale earlier. Now the other big morale issue in Vietnam was racial tensions.
Right.
Did you
right.
notice any of that where you were?
Not while I was stationed in Korea. I think we had probably the better years there, but I heard after that though, they did in '70 or '71. Yeah,
Now, did you have many black troops with you, or?
we did, yeah. We all got along. I know some of the black guys would get together and they'd sing doo-wop and they'd have fun, you know, and it would be their type of socializing, and some of the northern guys would hang out with each other, southern guys hang out with each other, etc. But still, we would all come back as a unit for our duty. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, as far as you can tell, I mean, were most of the guys where you were enlistees, or were they draftees that just got lucky, or?
You know what? I'd say it's about half and half. Now the enlistees were usually called lifers. It's just kind of a nickname because we doing another year. And if there was anything from Vietnam affecting culture in the Army in Korea, it would be that draftees were the ones that raised the most stink. You know, I didn't want to be here. Go get that lifer over there, have him do it, or something like that. You know, we didn't. It wasn't as bad as it was in Vietnam, though, I guess. But it got worse, from what I understand, after I left.
Yeah. Well, would you get people who were sent out of Vietnam for one reason or another, or were they really lifers who came up to you from Vietnam? People who really were in for the long haul.
There were some. And ironically, one of the drill sergeants from my basic training at Fort Bragg, he was there, and he had already spent his tour in Vietnam, and I think he was a 20-year man.
Okay.
And then he was assigned to Korea, and he was a good, excellent leader though. Yeah, he was in the scout platoon. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what would a scout platoon do?
The scout platoon had a couple purposes. One was a quick reactionary force. If there was an incident along the DMZ and was starting to get out of hand, immediately those guys would get called up and get on their 114s and head right out go right into the firefight. And then other support personnel, if they needed more, you know, they could get them, or if I was on a stakeout patrol or something like that, they could call us in, and it was. I don't know, it was quite an interesting ordeal over there, and very ingenious how, I'll mention his name, General Bonesteel, figured out how to hold the line along the DMZ. He called it a layered defense. You know, there's various lines of defense, starting with the DMZ itself. Then there's the patrols in the DMZ. They're the next line of defense. Next line of defense are minefields. Next line of defense are the guard posts, along with, I think it's about, I don't know, it's as wide as this. Anyway, I'd say about a 30-foot area along the whole barrier fence. It's all sand, and it's raked every day to make sure that there's no footprints in it. Then there's the fence itself. Then there's the foxholes. And then there's the stakeout behind the foxholes. That's where I did my duty when I was there. And then the last layer of defense is along the Imjin River itself. There's also patrols along the river as well as boats in the river. So that layered defense, I mean, it really worked well. And back to the experienced NCOs, they caught on to it right away. You know, and helped, because it was confusing to me when I first got there. Yeah, but Sergeant, not Sergeant Worth, the other sergeant anyways, he was really, I remember him, yeah.
Okay. Other things you got on your list in here from Korea?
Yeah, there's a couple things here. Propaganda speakers. They were a part of North Korea's mind, whatever you want to call it, messing with your mind tactics anyways. So every night, I mean every night, there was always something played over those loudspeakers. When I first got there, it used to be North Korean speaking English talking about how bad capitalism is, how it keeps people oppressed, and how bad it takes money and food away from the people that need it. And they were right on it. I mean, they were... what I'm saying is, I didn't think that they were right, but then they were glorifying their nation, their beloved leader Kim Il-sung, who was the first dictator there, and saying, you know, North Korea is a wonderful country. It's a peaceful country. We are a peaceful, loving people, and on and on and on and on. And everybody just, oh boy, and they were loud at night. I'll tell you that those speaker arrays were loud. And then they started it night after night. Commander Bucher was the commander on the SS Pueblo. After the crew release, they played his recording that he admitted that Pueblo was a spy ship. And he recanted that order, or that he did that of his own. Let's see, how was that? He did that for the crew.
Right.
Yes, so the crew could get released, and then he recanted it after he got to, okay, I have it straight now. And we'd hear his talking, you know. They must have recorded it, evidently, and said that, yes, the United States was a spy in North Korean territorial waters, which supposedly they weren't, and that we did wrong, the United States government was wrong, and we heard it night after night after night. Commander Bucher, though, I admire that whole crew because they were beaten and abused, and we knew it, you know. So there was nothing we could do about it.
And on the other side of things, let's see, you had a USO show come through?
Oh, yes, we did. Yes, we did. Let's see, I was there in '68, December, I think it was December 22nd or so. Bob Hope and his troop came over to give us a really good show. I believe it was in Munsani. It's the biggest town there near the DMZ. But he brought along, let me think, Rosie Greer, football player, Anne Margaret, Miss World was from Australia, Dean Martin's Gold Digger Dancers. I'm surprised I remember them all yet. And of course, Bob Hope, and I think I left out other, but it was a really good show. They did an excellent show. And after they got done with us, then he went off to Vietnam because they were there 24th and 5th, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so when do you leave Korea?
I left Korea in December of '69.
Okay. And where do you go from there?
I went to Germany.
Okay. Did you get to go home first?
I did. Let's see, how long was my leave? At least 2 weeks anyways, yeah. So that was, but Korean duty was interesting though. Yeah.
All right. And then in Germany, where do you go?
I was with 3rd of the 7th Cavalry and the 3rd Infantry Division, stationed in Schweinfurt. And we did duty along the Czechoslovakian border as well as the East German border at that time, yeah.
And what kind of duties did you have there?
It was similar to what Korea was, but it was, there was no hostile fire or anything like that, yeah. But we had to account for everything that we saw. It didn't matter if there was 3 cows one day and you saw 4 cows the next day, you had to write it down, whatever you saw. And, you know, you'd alternate shifts.
Okay. Now, did you do infantry duty, or were you more just a mechanic?
I did both, actually, because when I got in Germany, they were really short of scout
Okay.
personnel. And since I had some experience in Korea already, there were two of us that went to Germany. One got to go to the motor pool.
Mm-hmm.
You from Korea, you're going to be a scout now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. Yeah, so that's what I was. 11 Delta is a scout, so that's how I got into that. And then about halfway through my duty there, tour of duty, then motor pool was short of personnel, and they started to gain more manpower for the scouts, so I went back to the motor pool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how was life in Germany different from life in Korea?
A lot more peaceful. A lot more peaceful. It was interesting too because of the old. I'm talking castles that were there.
Mm-hmm.
The old cities. Munich. Let's see. I went to Munich. What's the other one? The historical part too, where Band of Brothers went. Berchtesgaden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's where the Eagle's Nest is. Right. I mean, there was a lot of history there. I liked seeing that.
You knew the history, so.
Yeah. And of course the German beer. It tastes a lot better than American beer any day. Yeah. The Germans know how to do it. Yeah.
All right. So what was daily life like there?
It was almost like a job. Well, it depended. Mostly we had a formation before sunup, and everybody had to be accounted for, and then we go off to breakfast, and then go to our different stations wherever we had to work, motor pool or whatever. And when I was in the scout platoon, I was already a mechanic, so I helped those guys out a lot. You know, I was a scout with mechanical know-how, and so that's what we did. Yep.
Okay. And would you rotate day shift, night shift, that kind of thing, or mostly work in the day?
Oh, it was all day shift. Yeah. And when you're a rookie, they used to call them just simply recruits over there. You know, you're a recruit. They'd put you on guard duty around the motor pool where all the vehicles are stored. But then when new recruits would come in, then you're off from that duty, and then they put the new recruits out there, and just the way they broke you in.
Okay. And did that not matter how long you've been in the Army? Is it you're new to this place, you get
right,
this job?
Yep, you're new to this place, and this is what's going to happen. If you're an E4, which is what I was, a specialist fourth class, you're going to, or lower, you're going to do duty. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you eventually moved up a rank?
I did, yeah. Yep. Spec 5. Specialist fifth class. That's when I got. I was the track commander for a vehicle, track recovery vehicle. Yeah.
All right. Now, aside from and at that point, then you didn't have to pull guard duty anymore? Or?
No guard duty. As a matter of fact, I was. Well, let's see. I didn't even have to do CQ. You know, that's the charge of quarters. There's always somebody charge of quarters at night. And I never even had to do that either. I was always on call in case something had to happen, and I went out and got a Jeep that broke down or a wreck or whatever, you know. So I was almost like a wrecker driver.
All right.
Yeah.
You're there in 1970. How did the German people seem to view American soldiers?
It was a mix. Most German people liked the American soldiers. Others thought American soldiers were arrogant. Some of them got stupid drunk, where I never saw Germans getting drunk. It's ironic. That's ironic. You know, they thought that, I remember being told that by a German too, exact words anyways, that America may be great, but some of you guys aren't, you know. Yeah. But that was an exception to the rule, because most Germans did like the Americans, at least in Schweinfurt, where I was anyways. Yeah.
How much concern was there that something might actually happen with the Soviets or East Germans or anything like that?
Oh, there was a concern. I mean, we were training for that all the time. We went out on maneuvers all the time for that purpose. We went to the range all the time with that in mind. You know, I mean, we had one company commander, Captain Andrews. I remember him. He was actually a student of at the military college of Russian tactics, and he was really hardcore with it. I liked him. He didn't hardly say much, you know. But he was well versed in Russian tactics. So we used to go out and do company size tactics on our own. He wanted to hone them up, hone our unit, and he wanted physical fitness and all that. You know, he was serious about it. But yeah, it was always thought of. You know, just because there's that peace and the calm across across those borders, and it was peaceful out there.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, were there any morale issues in Germany that you didn't see as much of in Korea?
Yes, there was. There was a stark difference there. Yeah, yeah. There was a really harsh drug problem over there. Hashish was the big drug of choice over there. And when I arrived in '70, there was no drug problem. It gradually crept in through that year, though. And by the end of the year, hashish was all over the place, and GIs were all of a sudden become drug dealers, getting into trouble, trying to ship it home in speakers and whatever merchandise that they could get. They got into some trouble. And it was getting really to the point where it was cutting into the morale of the unit. And there was a directive, and I'm not sure if it came from 3rd Division or what it was, but it got so bad that we all had to have a formation. A battalion commander had orders from each troop to have a formation, and the commander was going to tell the troops, if you want out of this man's army, you come see me within 2 days, I think it was, and we will usher you out of the army. We're tired of this drug problem, and we're tired of the disobedience and the lackadaisical attitude and all that. You know, he just laid it on the line, and there were a few of them that took him up on it. They wanted to, you know, they thought if they did this, did it that way, it wouldn't seem quite as harsh to ask for volunteers to get out of the army. I think they got a less than honorable discharge, and that was unheard of. And that's how bad that was. And you know, the army was on its way back to trying to get even if they were undermanned, at least get the morale back. Yeah, yeah.
So have the ones who were there at least be doing their jobs right.
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, with Vietnam winding down too, well, it wasn't quite winding down then. But
yeah,
then,
it was. In terms of the number of Americans there,
Americans?
They were pulling the soldiers out by then.
Because come to think about it, I think we did have some Vietnam vets serving in our unit too. Yeah, just before I left. Yeah. So yeah, that was bad, and there was some racial strife as well there too. And that's where another thing, the Germans didn't quite understand black people either. There was strife between not only the Germans, but also the Army as well, and then the African Americans. And they one day decided they're going to do a sit-down around the battalion headquarters flagpole, and they did. And they held hands, and they just stayed right there. And they had a list of demands, and they stayed there for all day into the night. Finally, someone from upper echelon came to listen to them. And there were some changes too. I mean, immediate changes, simple things like they wanted some soul food, so to speak, at the PX, and so they started getting things in, what is it, chitlings, I think collard greens, and that was the first. That was the easiest thing to do. But then also they wanted more respect from their commanders. They were thinking that there might have been some favoritism going on. I can't say, at least in my troop, I didn't see anything that was the company commander was picking on them more than anybody else. I didn't see anything like that. But there were a number of grievances anyways, and evidently they must have settled them enough. They had good talks, and then the ringleaders came in and had, I guess, a good talk. So things settled down a little bit after that. I mean, it wasn't a total relaxing atmosphere, but that was what I witnessed there anyways. I know there was a fight in the EM club one time between a black and a white, and I don't know how the whole thing came down, but I remember hearing about it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. See, now, the time that you're kind of finishing your 3 years is also the time when they're doing the drawdown from Vietnam. Army doesn't need as many people anymore. Did they make much of an effort to get you to re-enlist, or were...
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yep, they still wanted me to re-enlist, and what turned me off to re-enlisting, though, was those problems in Germany there. I said, you know, I don't want to be in this army if this is what it's going to be. But I was young, didn't think, you know. But the army has its ways of. They can't smooth everything over. Sometimes they try, but volunteer army really changed things. You know, I had no idea that was coming along either back in '71. So, but I did join the National Guard in late '60s, so to try to rekindle that feeling, and it just wasn't there anymore.
No, you were late 60s or late 70s?
Late 70s. Late 70s. Excuse me.
All right. So when you finish in Germany, then do you just come home and get discharged, or did you work stay anywhere else?
Germany, I was mustered out in Fort Dix.
Okay.
So my ETS, I think that's end of time in service. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you just come back to the States and get discharged, pretty much.
Right.
Okay. Other things that kind of stand out in your memory, either about Germany or Korea, that we haven't brought in here yet?
What was there? There's one thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, one thing I don't know if a lot of people know is that along the Korean DMZ, Agent Orange was used. And I did witness vehicles with 2.5-ton trucks with tanks on the back with the Koreans spraying alongside the roads and along fire paths, as well as any foliage that would be used as concealment. So I remember Agent Orange, and it took until, I think it was, President Bush was still president, so it's about maybe 10 years ago or so that they recognized that, yes, Agent Orange was used in Korea. And I do remember the speech. It was the same one they gave in Vietnam. You know, they're spraying this tactical insecticide or herbicide, excuse me. And it's not harmful to human beings. You can walk into it, you can walk on it, and everything else. And those plants would wilt. We saw it sprayed like at 2 in the afternoon. By the time we were out of the motor pool at 5, everything was just wilted down. You know. Yeah, yeah. So I thought it was interesting that was actually AO that they used over there, because it was recognized in Vietnam a lot earlier.
Well, but not necessarily as something harmful to people at that point. I mean, it got, you know, some of the people back here. You know, it took a while. A lot of people start wondering about it.
Okay.
But it was not. I mean, and I guess eventually they worried about the depots and places where it was stored and leaked and things. And the worst sites in Vietnam now were from that, where all the things leaked on these bases. But it was. But the official line was always, oh yeah, no problem.
Okay.
But it took you guys a lot longer to get recognized as being. So now potentially, can a vet who served in Korea at that time get diagnosed with Agent Orange, or?
Yes, it's the same as the symptoms are the same in Korea as well as Vietnam. The same symptoms. We have a presumptive time and area. The presumptive time is from, wish I could remember the exact dates, 67, 8, 9, and 70, I believe, maybe 71, that was sprayed Agent Orange there. And we can file claims if you have symptoms and they're verified by a doctor, and your unit was stationed there too. Right. Some people, that's one thing they're still trying to fight for is some units weren't included, but they say they were there. But you got to have proof nowadays. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as you're getting discharged, I mean, did you know what you wanted to do next? You're leaving the Army. What are you going to do?
Yes. I decided that I did like doing mechanical work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I went to Montcalm College, used the GI Bill to be an auto mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
and I liked it at first. There used to be ads in Hot Rod Magazine and Carcraft and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Turn your hobby into a job where you can make some money. And I thought, I think I'll do that. But the hobby, it wasn't fun.
Right.
I don't know, I didn't like working on cars after a while. So I quit doing that, and then helped my stepdad paint houses for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then General Motors on 36th Street was hiring, and I thought I would try to get a job in there, and sure enough, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I stayed there for 30 years.
Okay, so until the plant closed?
Till the plant closed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you gotten involved with veterans organizations?
Yes. I belonged to the VFW, Post 702. I always wanted to be with the VFW for quite a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, just about 3 or 4 years ago, I did join the VFW, a member at large.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met one of the guys at Myers I never knew. And from that point on, he told me, try Post 702, you'll like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do. I enjoy being with those guys. We have them from World War II all the way through Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And there's one common thread that we all have. We were in combat zones to one degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, had people serving where you were you always eligible to join the VFW, or did someone have to decide at some point that you could be let in? Because it wasn't a war over there, after all.
Well, the reason there was when General Bonesteel managed to get combat pay,
Mm-hmm.
because that was authorized, I think, from 60, or was it? I know during the time I was there, 68,
Okay.
69, we had combat pay, and I think it ended in 71.
Okay, so that basically qualifies you at that point.
That
for
qualified us,
VFW.
and the other qualifier was with the VFW, anyone who was awarded the Expeditionary Forces Medal.
Mm-hmm.
And there were, as you probably know, a lot of little small conflicts
Yep.
that never made front page, but because there was no campaign medal to award them,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like Somalia, for instance, they would be awarded the Expeditionary Forces Medal.
Mm-hmm.
So we were part of the brush fire crew, you know, that took care of the little jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned a little earlier that you tried out the National Guard. Can you
Right,
talk a
right.
little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I joined, let's see, in 68, or 78.
yeah.
78, I'm back in the 60s again. I joined in 78, and I was in for a couple years. 126th Infantry, and I was on the fire support team, the FIST, they call it. And that's where I was trained to direct any kind of fire support
Mm-hmm.
to wherever the company commander would like to have it dropped. It didn't matter if it's air, sea, land, artillery, you know, mortars or whatever. I learned how to do that, and I liked doing it. Actually, it was quite a sense of accomplishment, taking a grid map and reading it, and finally getting a round, an artillery round in there, and creeping it in and getting right where I want, and then fire for effect. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. But because we only met once a month and we went up to Grayling once a year, it didn't have that same kind of camaraderie you have in the Army with your brothers all the time. And it just, I thought that I could rekindle that fire, and it just didn't work. I'm not saying the Guard was wrong or anything like that. It just, but in retrospect, I could have stayed and gotten a pension. 2020 hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I guess to look back on things now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you?
Well, I know time in the service from the day I was a raw recruit until I got out helped me build a lot of confidence. There were things I never thought I could do that I did, and places I went to see that I never thought I'd ever get to see, and I learned a skill. And I had multiple jobs, even though I had one skill. I mean, I was a Jeep commander's driver. I mean, I went all over the place and did things, different jobs. So it was a good experience, really. Other than towards the end, I didn't know quite how to take what was going on in the Army at that time. Yeah.
All right. I'd just like to close here by thanking you for taking the time to talk to me today.
You're welcome, Jim.
Okay.